but I am going to take just a minute to introduce Carson. So those of you who don't know Carson, he was actually the chair of the state party for a couple of years, and he did a tremendous job for us as the party chair. I have incredible respect for him because Carson is a man of his word, and if he gives you his word, you can take it on a handshake. So to me, that's the type of leaders that we need to see representing us all the way down from city all the way up to the federal level, because we need people who mean what they say. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Carson Jorgensen, who is the only candidate who refused to collect signatures and wanted to put the decision in your hands to choose the governor.
Everybody hear me all right? Thanks everybody for coming here tonight. I appreciate Josh putting this together again. It's nice to be able to get in front of a lot of people, because sometimes we travel the whole state and we find ourselves running, and we don't get that connection that we'd like to get with people and actually sit down and have the conversations that matter to you. And that is why, as he said, as chairman, it was so important to me that I not gather signatures, because I fought for the party and I believe in what the party stands for, and I believe in you, and I believe in your ability to choose candidates, that they shouldn't be able to buy their way onto the ballot and pay for those signatures to get on there. And I think that we have an opportunity as delegates that we learn what these candidates are about. And that's something that I think we've been missing in our election system for some time, not just locally, but nationally as well, is that we see bits and pieces of who these candidates are and who these people are and what they want to show you. But as you get time and you see them more than once and you're able to interact with them, you're able to see who they really are. And that's really what we're missing in politics right now. And as I've said, I'll talk here for a few minutes and then we'll, no, you're good, man. I want to thank Mac because I put him on the spot about 10 minutes ago. I was like, hey, Mac, do me a solid here. But Mac's always been there for me at the party. And when you talk about good people, Mac has always been there for me. And as he said earlier, I've done deals my whole life on a handshake. And my grandpa taught me a lesson when I was a young kid. And it was that everything you have, a man's word is the only thing that he has. And if he looks you in the eye and shakes your hand, that better be what you need. Because if you don't have your word, you haven't got anything. And so that's something that I have always felt was very important and, again, missing in our politics today. When people ask me, why I run for governor, why get out? And I knew when I stepped down from chairman of the party that this was in my future and this was something I felt like I needed to do. And the reason being is for far too long, we've elected Republicans in this state, and those Republicans feel the need to toe the line. I know you've seen it. I know you've felt it. They wander down the middle of the road trying to please everybody when we know it works. That red works better than blue. Conservative policies are better than liberal. Republican policies are better than Democrat policy. Those things we have seen. I mean, you look at the blue states right now. You look what's happening across this country, their fiscal policy, and what they're doing to those states. They are leaving in droves. It is an absolute exodus because those governments have made it nearly impossible for those people to move around. That's made them impossible for them to climb the ladder. And that's something that I believe is a part of the American dream. It's part of everything that we have. And so when you take that away, what do we have left? And so that's what made me nervous about Utah, because I'm worried about the direction of the state and the quality of our leadership. And many of you have expressed your frustrations with things that you've seen and things that have happened. And that's something that we have to watch. It's something that we have to keep our finger on. Because we don't elect these Republicans. Wander down the road. They come to us and they say, you know what, we're conservative. We're going to take the state in a conservative direction, and everybody's on board for that. But once they're elected, the policies change, we start to wander, and we don't understand why. This is a funny joke somebody told me the other day. Like, you've never heard a liberal run for office and say, hey, I'm a moderate, you can vote for me. And then they get in, and all of a sudden they're conservative, and everybody's mad. That never happens. And so why does it go the other direction? Why are we continually finding that in Utah? And when I talk about blue state policies, And the one thing many of you have probably heard me talk about quite a bit already is our budget, the way that our state is spending money. Just this past Monday, the state auditor released a report that said that Utah is in danger because of how much money we are using from the federal government to pay our bills here in the state. Over the last 10 years, we've increased our budget by double. We've gone from spending $14 billion a year to $29.5 billion a year. That's a lot. While our population has only increased 14%. So we've doubled spending, population's increased 14%, but you look at the last 3 years. Since 2021, our budget's gone from $20.5 billion to $29.5 billion. We've added 1/3 to our budget in the last 3 years. And everybody looks at DC and they talk about the runaway spending and what's happening to our country because of what's happening in DC. The state of Utah is not doing things much different. We continue to spend money, tax for things that we want, not things that we need. Look at this baseball stadium. I don't know about you, but I don't really care for baseball, but that's not the point. I don't think we should put $1 billion of taxpayer money into a baseball stadium. And it's not because I don't like it. It's because right is right and wrong is wrong regardless. Because we shouldn't be using taxpayer money to pay for things that we want. And then it's another $1 billion of taxpayer money for an NHL team. Again, I like hockey better than I like baseball, but it's still wrong. And that's where we're getting ourselves in trouble. I don't know if any of you have driven down Highway 6 lately. Highway 6 is a mess. It's got potholes that'll knock the front end out of your car pretty quick. We can't pay to fix Highway 6, but we can sure fork out $1 billion for a baseball stadium. Those are the types of things that I'm talking about. Those are the types of things that concern me. And when we're talking about spending, what really concerns me is not, and as the auditor said earlier this week, what really concerns me is the dependency that we are having on the federal government, and that we are growing our dependency on the federal government. As of 2021, we took about $4 billion a year from the federal government to pay our bills. Right now, we're taking $9.5 billion, more than double our dependency on the federal government to pay our bills, and that was part of their audit. That 1/3 of our bills are being paid by the federal government right now. And the way that they're spending money, I can't think of a worse idea than to hitch our wagon to the federal government. Because everybody tells me, we want our public lands back from the federal government. We want the federal government out of our public schools. We want the federal government out of our lives. The problem is, we can't get the federal government out of our schools, off of our lands, and out of our lives until we stop taking money from them. And that's just it. We have become dependent on them. And as we want to push back, and we want to say, we're going to exert our states' rights, and we're going to push back on the 10th Amendment. We can't, because we are owned by them. And so that to me is a huge part of it, because people say, every politician talks about fiscal policy. Every politician talks about the budget. I'm sorry, there's a reason I talk about the budget, because it trickles down into everything in our lives and the things that are affecting us most. And that's what I worry about. Because as we become dependent on the federal government more and more, we have less of a chance of taking things back. And when we talk specifically about public lands is something I've done my whole life. We've ranched on public lands since before I was born. My family's been here for 170 years, 6 generations deep in Utah ranching. And we've run on public lands. We utilize it, we graze it, and we dealt with it. And we see the firsthand struggle. But everything that you see in this world, when you look at the world around you, you look at anything that's made, from the carpet to the chairs to your cars, to anything you use in your life, it comes out of the ground. It's either mined, it's drilled for, it's grown, it's grazed, it's logged, whatever it is, it comes from the ground. And when you lock these people off of their lands, and when the federal government pushes us off our land, they lock us from our ability to be able to create and to grow our economy and to build our economy. And so when I talk about fiscal policy, it's because it's multifaceted, because we do. We need access in this state to our public lands. Absolutely. We need to be mining uranium in the southern part. We need to be cutting down our mismanaged forest here in the northern part. It is from one end to the other. We should be producing our own energy and mining our own coal, but it is an all-out attack on fossil fuels right now, where our state needs to have the solvency to be able to say, we're not going to do this anymore. Because for far too long, we've gone to the federal government and we've asked for permission for everything. We've asked for everything. We say, we're going to sue you to be able to do this. But as a state, or beyond that. Because you see what happened in Texas this last 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago now. When the federal government came to Abbott, they said, you can't do that. And Abbott said, watch me. You're not going to secure the southern border, I am. They told him, you can't do that. And Abbott said, watch. And he did it. And the federal government backed up. And that's where we're at with the federal government anymore. We need to continue to push back on them and say, this is not your right, this is not your area. Since when did we vote on the EPA? When we have unelected bureaucrats that are ramming things down the state's throats that they never had a say in. And this is where the governor comes in. And this is where the states have to continue to push back. Because when you look across this country, there are 100 senators. There's 435 members of Congress, but there are 50 governors. And those governors have the ability to band together, push back against the federal governments, and assert their states' rights. And if you look, and if you had DeSantis, Abbott, no, Huckabee Sanders, and it's a good, strong governor here in Utah, you'd be able to look the federal government in the eyes and say, no more. You guys are not listening. You don't hear us, and you refuse to change. And so we're going to force you to. And that's where we're at. And then again, it trickles down even further. Everybody wants the federal government out of our public schools. The federal government makes up about 9% of our budget in our public schools. 9% is about $650 million a year the federal government pours into our public education. I'm all for education, and I think we need to fund it correctly. That being said, everything that you're seeing in our public education that you disagree with, the CRT, the DEI, all of the books that you don't want to see in there, that is coming from the federal government and our inability to step back from them. They claim over the past 2 years, I'd like to see improvement, but they claim over the past 2 years $1.3 billion in tax cuts. Why didn't we take $650 million? Because I know about you, I didn't feel the tax cut. My taxes just keep going up. Why didn't we take some of that money and put it into public education? Fund our education, get the federal government out. Because what we're getting from the federal government is not Utah values. What they're teaching our children is not Utah values. One of my kids here, she's here tonight, she come home from school and told me that the teacher in school told them that cows were bad for the environment. We sat down and had a talk about how cows are not bad. But these are the kind of things that are happening. Again, it's a war on everything that makes our country go round. Agriculture, energy sector, manufacturing. It's all these things that become a problem, but they're what contribute to what is our country. They are what drive our economy, and they're what makes people's lives better. And then when you look at the housing crisis, and this is another strong critique I have of what Utah is doing right now. When you look at what's going on in the housing industry right now, the governor's new bill, 35,000 new homes in the state of Utah. I agree we need more homes, but again, it's not the government's job. We're putting the government into places where it doesn't belong. They just put about, I think it's $178 million they allotted to it. But when you step back and take a look at what this bill actually does, it's not going to help. It's going to hurt the housing industry. And the reason I say that is when you look at the policy and the stringent strings that come with this bill, this low interest funding is available to developers. It's not available to home buyers. So we're now subsidizing the developers to build more homes. They're using government money. We've seen what happens in this country when we throw government money at things to create inflation. Well, it's going to do the same thing to our housing market. The other credential that they had for in this bill that the home has to be a single-family home less than $450,000. I don't know about you, but I don't make $129,000 a year. And that's what it requires to afford their affordable housing. That's pretty steep. And so when you look at that, you're going to continue to subsidize that. And we cannot continue to create inflation. The federal government's doing plenty for us. People look at me and say, then what are we going to do about the housing crisis? At some point, the market has to correct itself. But as long as we're pouring government money on top of it, it's not going to correct itself. They're holding it up, and we're waiting for the bubble to burst. But it's not going to as long as government keeps pouring money after it. That being said, I drove down the street here and I was talking to my wife about it. We look back in the 50s and the 60s, houses they were building weren't all that big. And we as Utahns have become pretty accustomed to calling starter homes 1,500 square foot houses. But back in the day, a starter home might have been 900 square feet. And that might be what we have to go back to, because I wish I had all the answers, but I don't. But I know people are going to have to step back and say, I want this, but I can't afford it. But in this world, we've learned as government to show this. It doesn't matter if you can afford it or not, just keep piling it on debt and it's fine. And so that's somewhere where I disagree, and we're going to hold that up. But the problem is not going to be solved by the federal government. It's not going to be solved by the state government. It's going to be solved by natural markets and letting people make decisions for themselves. And so that's another place where I see this fiscal policy getting in the way of what's happening. And this trickles down to a little bit. It trickles down through water rights and our ability to capture water here in the state. We don't have a water problem. We have a water storage problem. We're unable to store what comes up. I mean, you look at, this is not as much a problem, and it is a problem here, but it's not as much as a problem when you get into the south. You look at our little hometown. We don't have enough water to continue to issue building permits. We've had to halt building permits a couple of times now because we don't have enough drinking water to let anybody get in new houses. This is contributing to the problem. Our town has $15.1 million in a bank account right now. They have the property bought, and they have the water rights for the water. But we cannot get the state to cut the red tape to be able to allow us to store the water for more than 48 hours that we own. There's a 100-year-old decree that we've gone to the government 3 or 4 times now to try to get reversed that says that we own the water, but we can't store it for more than 48 hours. So what does it do? It runs down the creek, goes out into the desert, and dries up in the severe sinks every year. This is a problem, and we have had no help fixing it, especially from the top. The state of Utah should be storing every single drop of water that we can when the getting is good. Because as we saw last year, we had a bumper crop on the mountain. The snow was great. We filled the Great Salt Lake 5.5 feet. This is another place where Utah's issuing poor fiscal policy, and I will continue to disagree with them on this all the day long. Over the past 3 years, we've poured $1 billion into putting water into the Great Salt Lake. I agree the Great Salt Lake, you need to take care of it. That being said, you took $1 billion from agriculture and our production here in the state and dumped it into the Great Salt Lake. That $1 billion, had it not snowed last year, would have raised the lake less than 7 inches. It wouldn't even have compensated for evaporation. So we have to step back and sometimes think, we can't play God. We can't fix everything. And I wish I could tell you that we have all the answers, but for far too long we've had politicians telling you that we can fix these things, that government is the solution. When Reagan said government is not the problem, government's not the solution, it's the problem, he meant it and he was absolutely correct. That's another place that I think Utah is coming short from. We've seen agricultural land, and this is really important to me, and I know you know this, but we've seen agricultural land as the state dry up. As we continue to build out our cities, we're pushing ag out. As of this is a statistic that should scare everybody in this country. As of 2019, the United States became a net importer of agricultural products, meaning if trade stopped today and imports were no longer coming in, the United States now has an inability to feed its population. I would hate to see what would happen if commerce on the freeway stopped for a week. Warehouses in the state of Utah have less than a week's worth of food in store. And we have an inability in the state to continue to produce enough to feed our people. And so these are things that frankly keep me up at night. This is something that we should be focusing on. Local production in agriculture, putting things back in. People ask, why do all the farmers in the state of Utah grow alfalfa? It is because we have taken the infrastructure away to be able to process other things. Where we come from in Sanpete County, they used to grow sugar beets, they used to grow snap peas, they used to grow beans, they used to grow corn. They used to grow a lot of things that people could actually consume. When people give alfalfa a hard time, but if you eat milk, drink milk, and eat beef, you've definitely contributed to alfalfa, because that's where all the alfalfa goes in the state. It goes to dairy, and it goes to feeding animals. All of that being said, we've taken the infrastructure away to be able to process these other things. And there is a big push by the rural counties right now to bring back local production. Actually, tomorrow, one of the biggest processing facilities for beef in the state will open again. It's the first time in, I think, 40 years that we've opened one this size, and it's in Richmond. We're opening another one in Lehi here before too long. But then you go just south of Lehi, and this is a big push by the counties, and this is where I think the state should be putting some emphasis, is putting this infrastructure back into place to be able to process this. So they're going to put fruit processing, they're going to put vegetable processing, and animal processing just south of Lehi out by the tank. This is a place we should. And when I say all this, Utah should be able to stand on its own, regardless of what happens elsewhere. We should mine and drill for our own energy. We should produce our own power. We should be refining our own fuel. We should be growing our own food. And we should make sure that we have all the water that we need for our kids to continue to live here and to grow what we need and to manage our lives in a way that has gotten us this far. Because when we look at economic development, when we look at how the state has changed over the past 25, 30 years, we've really altered our economy drastically. We've gone from a lot of different businesses and multifaceted economy to putting all of our eggs in one basket and into the tech industry. And that's partially where we're at right now. And our spending and why our spending has increased the way it has, because we are on a sugar high from the tech spending. But as we've seen, the tech world fluctuates so fast. When things go south, the layoffs come. And we don't have a diverse enough economy anymore to suck up the rest of those jobs that are pushed out by the tech sector. And so that's something we need to do. And then we come back to education. I'm a big advocate for trade schools. And this is all about diversifying our economy. Anywhere you look right now that is a blue-collar job, we're talking excavators, mechanics, people building homes. All of those things are short. They can't find truck drivers. They can't find loader operators. We are short blue-collar jobs, and they're the ones running. And when these kids go to school, we've messed up our university systems to a great deal. And I know that everybody in here knows that there are some great things learned at university. Everybody thinks there's one path. And we have basically told an entire generation of kids that these blue-collar jobs don't matter. We've taken them out of schools. They don't see them anymore. They're things that we used to have. We used to have home ec, but these kids can't come out of school. They don't even know how to change a tire. They don't know how to check the oil in their car. They don't know how to hang a picture on their wall. And I think we're doing them a complete disservice. With all that said, again, we've taken our tech colleges out. But these kids go to school. And they come out making $100,000 a year instead of being $100,000 in debt. That's a big part of our problem in this state right now, is we have a lot of young people with student debt. And it is adding up and it is accruing. But they come out of school and they don't even have a job to repay that. And that is a problem. And that is where we need to be holding higher ed accountable. The governor appoints the Board of Higher Education. That's somewhere we can make a massive difference in putting emphasis back on getting these kids out of school with jobs that are sorely needed, that pay them a wage that they can live off in this state, and they can afford to build a home, and they can come back and live with their kids, and they can have a family. Because everybody says that to me. You know, I worry about my kids. I worry about my kids being able to stay here and live here and have a family. Well, it's time we stop doing the same thing and expecting a different result, because for far too long now, that's what we've done. The last thing I'll touch on before we open it up for comment and questions, because I like that better. The one thing people say, you know, what's the one thing you would warn people against in this state, besides the budget, that you will turn this state back blue or faster blue than anything else? And that is letting the current governor appoint all our statewide offices and our school board. Think about that for a minute. They pass legislation, or they put forward legislation now. Both the brother-in-law of the governor and another bill that came out, 545, that would appoint state officers, the treasurer, the auditor, and the attorney general. I don't know about you, but I don't want my role to go away. I want to be able to appoint those people by the voice of the people. And that's how it should stay. The governor came out 3 weeks ago in a press conference, and he said that he should be the one to appoint your state school board members. He said it's easier for the public to hold the governor accountable than it is their state school board member. Guys, this is where we're at. I can't even make that one up. Okay. To get rid of a sitting school board member, it is a lot easier to remove than to be an incumbent governor. I'm just going to tell you that right now. That being said, we've seen this culmination, this conglomeration of power across the country for years now. It never worked. You look at these blue states, it's exactly what they've done. It's these blue state policies that are directing our state, and it's what's going to make it unlivable for our kids. I worry about my kids too. I got 5 little girls, and they matter to me, and their future matters to me. And that's why I got into this in the first place. I'd much rather be home herding sheep, and you've heard me say that 100 times, but it's the truth. I'd rather stay at home and step back. But it's time for good people to step up wherever you can find them. And if you can't be one of those people, get behind somebody who is. Because the time is running short, but I think we can turn this around. But we do. We have an opportunity over the next few years to push Utah back to the right and to take away those blue state policies that have hurt other states in the past and that are hurting ours now. You look at what Abbott has done in Texas. You look at what DeSantis did in Florida. Florida was a swing state. And what did DeSantis do? He implemented a strict policy that said, this is what we're doing and this is where we're going. And now he flipped the state back 20 points to the Republican side. It is no longer a swing state. It is solidly Republican. This is about the policies. And what did he do? He said what he meant. He meant what he said. And he did it, regardless of what happened. Like him, hate him, Trump did the same thing. People say, oh, Trump's a liar. No, Trump tells the truth too often when he shouldn't tell the truth. But what he said is what he did. And that's what we should expect from our politicians, because it's time we stop letting our politicians wander down the center of the road. It's time we stop letting them toe the line. It's time we take a strong conservative direction and have a commitment to head that way. And that's what we need, and that's what we deserve, and that's why I'm running for governor.
First of all,
You got it.
So go ahead, stand up and. I'm a state delegate. I've been doing this since Joe and Chris Kennedy days.
Sure.
So I've watched a lot of things happen at the state party level. And I can say, from my experience, that you ran the party better than anyone for a long time because you were a straight shooter.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that very, very much. Now, that's not saying I'm endorsing you yet. However, that's a strong endorsement because you did what you said, just like you did there, and that's working. And you kept your word. And I appreciate that. It's the straightest shooting that's ever been done at the GOP party head for a long time.
I don't know anything different.
It's in and out. I have two questions for you. It's a small room. First question is, ICE recently said that we are a sanctuary state. Do you believe that? And if so, what do we need to do differently to change that? And then two, would you continue to enumerate some of the things that we need to understand why you would challenge a governor that's, at least with the populace, well respected, so it seems.
Sure.
So if you'll enumerate some of those issues, but are we a sanctuary state, and what do we need to do differently at that state?
Okay, yeah. No, absolutely. The ICE thing has been a pretty hot topic lately, and when this all kind of came to fruition, blew up in the media, I didn't jump to conclusion. I didn't use it as a political talking point to jump out in front of it and try to gain points with everybody. First thing I did was step back and try to evaluate what's actually happening. And I went to the legislature with my friends there and I said, okay, do we have a law on the bill, on the docs that says that we're a sanctuary state? And they said, absolutely not. I said, okay. And the next thing I did is I went to the sheriffs. And I reached out to the head of the sheriff's department, the state, the guy that's over all of them, and I said, okay, what's the deal? Because I know everybody's pushing me under the bus and I want to know what's going on. And he says, it is absolutely untrue. We have never passed anything or said anything that would make us a sanctuary state. That being said, the ICE designation, and I'll try to explain this as best as I can because it's a little bit complicated. The ICE designation of the sanctuary state is coming from ICE. And remember, ICE is a federal agency, so they're coming down to the states and they're making that declaration. The ICE declaration, from my understanding, and my talks with the legislature and sheriff's office, and some members of ICE, is that Utah sheriffs won't work with ICE on the facts that we won't house their people for them. We have the facilities. ICE doesn't have a facility here. We have the empty facilities, but they want to put all of that on us. ICE doesn't have the funds for us to run those facilities, so they want us to house them there. They want us to staff it. They want us to take care of it and detain them all at the same time. So that's not something that we're able to do because they have made the stipulations so stringent that we physically cannot meet those without opening up the state for massive lawsuits because we're housing illegal immigrants. And I know that sounds ridiculous because it is ridiculous. But that's where that designation comes from. The problem is right now is the southern border. I mean, when we're talking about it, what can we do? And people come to me all the time, what are we going to do about the southern border? One, from day one, it shouldn't have been, let's put our finger in the air and see which way the wind's blowing, decide if it's popular, and then send people to the southern border. No, we should have sent people to the border from day one. And we should have sent the National Guard and said, if the federal government refuses, again, this comes back to me saying we need to stand with the other states. If the federal government refuses to secure our border, which is one of the only things that the federal government should be, they are great at doing things they're not supposed to do, and they are horrible at doing the things that they actually should be doing, like secure our borders, maintain our elections. Those are the types of things they should be doing, and they're not. So we should have sent people from day one to the border. And that should have been thing one. When Abbott was like, hey, we need help, we should have been there with more than just 10 people. Because if we sent 5 highway patrol, 5 National Guards, I don't know about you, but they might need a little more help. So we should be doing everything we can. The other thing is, as a state, we cannot deport people. We can't deport people out of the country. We can put them on a bus and send them to California, though. And we should be stopping these buses at the border that are coming in that we know are filled with immigrants. I'm okay with immigration. I think immigration is great. But illegal immigration is not. There is a system in place for a reason. And our borders, if you don't have a border, you don't have a country. And that is what we should be doing. That is what we can be doing, is turning the buses around at the border. And when we start capturing people and detaining people, it's got to start with the most dangerous first. We know who they are. We know where they're at. We've got to stop those people first, remove those, and then start working our way forward. But we have to shut. You come home and your house is flooding. The first thing you do, grab a bucket? No, you shut the water off. And that's where we're at with the southern border. We have to work with the other states because the Fed's refusing to do it. We shut the inflow off, then we can deal with the rest of it. But until then, we're in a tough spot. And we need to start talking about what kind of tough spot. The other thing I want answers to, the governor's office knows this, but everybody should be asking for answers. How many are here? Do we know how many are in the state? What are we doing for them? Because we do issue driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. When they show up to the hospital, are we treating them? We should treat them. We should be compassionate. They're getting free health care. They're getting driver's licenses. The other question is, when you register for a driver's license, you usually register to vote at the same time. Are they registering to vote? These are honest, legitimate questions that everybody should be asking, because these things are happening. That being said, I'll address his second point, and then I'll come here. As far as my differences, I pointed out fiscal policy. That is somewhere where even the Utah Taxpayers Association is criticizing heavily. He and I don't agree on a lot of social issues. When he came out with his pronouns and vetoed the transgender boys, girls sports bill, everybody knew at that time. That's somewhere I disagree. We have to start calling a spade a spade. And that is something he refuses to do. And I try not to make my campaign about what he's doing, not what I, but at some point you have to draw a contrast. And this is where we're at. Again, look at what his policy was in the first 3 years of his administration. 6 months ago, he learned how to spell conservative. It's election year. Sometimes that'll help these people to remember that we have to be conservative in the state of Utah. Again, there are many things that he and I see differently. Those are some of the top issues. And it's to, where are we putting our attention? Again, like I talked about Highway 6 and the money, and we should be investing in our infrastructure, making sure our roads are good, making sure that we're not giving people the ability to tax citizens without their say. They implemented the inland port, and they are implementing a special tax district for these new baseball stadiums. If I were all you and you don't know what a special tax district is, go home and research it. Because special tax districts are appointed, they are not elected, but they have the ability to levy a tax against you. These are boards that are put in place that they can tax you, and the government is giving them the power to do that. The inland port has failed its last 5 audits. They have given them free rein to tax you, but they can't pass it on. That is another question. We're focusing on things that do not matter, and we're focusing on things that shouldn't matter, and giving attention to way too many things in downtown Salt Lake that are not affecting the rest of Utahns while we let our roads and our infrastructure. Now, let the federal government push us around. And that's a place where I believe that we can make all the difference in the world. Because you've got Florida in the east that's solid red, you've got Texas in the south And we need a solid conservative state out here in the West. If we're going to change our country, the West needs somewhere to look to. They need a stronghold out here where Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, they'll look to us. This will change our country. And everybody wants to know, how does local politics change our country? It starts right here. Okay, let's go there. I'm going to grab a drink. What? Thanks.
Okay, I think this mic's working better.
My daughter works for a commercial roofing company, and a lot of, I'm sure, illegals are being hired, and they all take 5 to 7 people as dependents, so they don't have to pay any federal taxes and stuff. Anyhow, but my question that I have is Harriman City's 30-33% of the schools that I'm in Riverton.
Yeah.
And I had heard that the government is going roundabout ways giving money to, which is our tax money,
Sure.
giving money to different organizations to help settle them. What do you know of that? And you
I know just
I mean,
enough to get in trouble. That report came out that 33% or 30% of Harriman schools now are filled with illegal immigrants. And these kids are going to stay here. I mean, that's just it, because we haven't been able to stop them. And so we want them to have an education, not on the backs of everybody else who's actually paying their taxes and nobody else is paying their way. That being said, the government, from everything that I understand, are funding third-party organizations who are helping them get clothes and helping them get backpacks and helping them get to school. Again, this is putting such a strain on the state of Utah and the country itself. I mean, when you actually look at the strain in illegal immigration, and I can't help but think it's by design. I've seen what's happening in Europe right now. They are unable to function as a society because of their illegal immigration coming in from North Africa and the Middle East. They cannot function. That's happening here. And so what can we do about it? The government has to stop funding these third-party organizations. You should know where every dollar of your taxpayer money goes. And that's something, again, that we can't do.
I should at least get to write it off as a charity.
As a dependent or a charitable donation, absolutely. And again, that's one thing that I've really been looking into over the last few weeks, as it's become, forefront thought. That's something I wish I had more information on, but that's about the extent of my knowledge on that one. Let's go there, and then we'll go over here, and then over there.
I'll speak loudly. So, Carson, easy question. What books are you reading? Also, the 30% is refugees, as far as I can tell. Which there's a lot of people who are refugees,
Right.
aren't illegal immigrants.
I'm all right with legal refugees. Like when we're talking about legal refugees and actual asylum seekers, not people who show us at the border.
That's not what the school teachers tell me.
I'm a substitute teacher in Jordan, and I taught a class in English as a second language 2 weeks ago, and half the class was from Colombia, the other half was from Venezuela. Wow.
There's a lot of illegals claiming
No, I mean,
refugees.
I'm the accuracy, so I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And Utah is already one of the most diverse economies in the country. It's like 5 or 6 depending on who you ask. So, like, where do you think we need to improve? Because, I mean, tech is, I work in tech.
Yeah,
tech
sure.
is what brings money into the state from outside the state.
Sure. No, and that's just it. We're talking about the best run state. People call Utah the best run state, the best managed state. I often tell my people see the other states. It's a funny joke. When you look at the legislative session this past year, the money that they spent, I don't know how you can call us the best managed state. That being said, I think we're not putting emphasis on these outside jobs anymore. And it hasn't caught up to us yet, but it's about to. Because I'm watching jobs disappear. Everybody's like, oh, the tech sector is growing great. I'm like, well, that's good. Let's keep growing it. But also, at the same time, our construction is not growing at the same rate. Our blue-collar jobs are not growing at the same rate. The people who are actually building the infrastructure, our infrastructure is not keeping up with it. And that's somewhere where we're sorely lacking. That's somewhere where we're not keeping up with that influx. And so I hope that makes sense, because what I'm saying is it's not that we're missing those things, it's they're becoming out of balance. And tech does bring in jobs rapidly. When they build those things, we're talking 1,200,
It's
1,500.
internal versus external. So
Yeah.
tech is external, and construction is interim, because it's supported by people bringing money in.
Exactly, and so that's where we're seeing this imbalance, and we don't match it with infrastructure. Every time I come to the city, American Fork, I come around the turn around and 8th North in Oregon, and it's red every time. We don't have the infrastructure to match what we're bringing in, and then we can start talking about incentives. We're putting state incentives to bring these big businesses in. They're great, but most of the businesses they're bringing in are in the tech sector. Talking to somebody from southern Utah the other day, he has a small business, and he tries to keep up. It's a medical supply company. The government gives incentives to its biggest competitors that are big businesses that come from out of state. Those same things are not being given to our small businesses, and so that's the inequality I'm talking about. We need to have a level playing field if we're going to have our small businesses, because outside the Wasatch Front, we're running on a few things. And this is where it comes back. The governor has to not just represent 2 counties. We're struggling with a lot of different problems outside of Utah County. These jobs are drying up. We're seeing them go away because you're seeing big incentives given. Big businesses brought in, these small companies can no longer compete.
Also a lot of regulation.
Yeah, and regulation is the biggest detriment. You want to talk about the housing industry. There was a study come out that sometime up to 40% in some states of housing costs could be reduced by regulation. And I'll find that video and I'll post it because it was well done. But it was done by FGA and the Federation for Government Accountability. It was done by them, and it did say if we reduce regulation, we could cut the housing costs by 40%.
Other question on books?
Yeah. Oh, books. You know, one of my favorite books of all time, and I read it over and over and over and over again, is Becoming George Washington by Glenn Beck. It's one of my favorite books because it talks about what went into making George Washington and who he actually was, and I think that's fascinating because it dives into the character. I love reading Louis L'Amour books. I know that it's not.
I actually told my wife this time, so.
Yeah, see, the Static is my favorite book of all of the Louis L'Amour and the Iron Marshal. Like, let's be honest. I love Louis L'Amour, and we're traveling from one end of the state to the other. I really love podcasts, but the other 2 that I'm reading right now, and I've read it kind of in tandem and gone back and forth, is both of Jordan Peterson's book, The 12 Steps, and then The 12 Steps Again. And those are fascinating dive into the human mind and the reason why people do, because that's my biggest thing. Why do people do what they do? And that's, I believe, how you break down what's happening in society. So we're going to go here and then over there.
My name's Jack Phillips. I'm a state delegate right now. I've been a state delegate for a number of years. And
Sure.
I will reiterate what this man said. I know you brought the Republican State Committee into budget.
Yeah.
I can tell you that the last reorganization you mentioned, I was totally shocked at how good money the committee has to operate on.
Sure.
I mean, Romney probably had 15, 20, maybe 30 times as much money as the,
This is a state party had, right?
yeah, it was less than $1 million, 800 or something.
Right.
That was pretty shocking, but congratulations for that. Now, 2 quick questions. One is, the ICE is saying, and I hate to bring that up again,
Very good.
but ICE is saying that 67% of the people that they detain, that they arrest, are released. Are those numbers correct? Maybe 33% they can handle, 67% because we can't put them in. That's got to be causing some trauma in the state and cost.
Sure. I wish I could answer that question. I don't have it, but I highly doubt that. And that's the ones we're talking about that they're actually capturing and actually seeing and letting them go. What about all the ones they're not seeing? Because my doubt is they're catching half of them, maybe, that are coming across the border. I mean, when you go travel along the border, it's a pretty good place.
Well, I don't know. I'm an old man now, and now the state makes me go to the DMV, make sure I haven't lost my mind or my eyesight, get my driver's license. And I was there just about a month ago, and I'll tell you, I was the only white guy there. I was thinking I should have a firearm, and they were all tattooed. Many of them were tattooed over their necks and stuff. It was a little scary, a little frightening. That probably makes me think I'm a racist. I'm not a racist. I've got a lot of, I can Hispanic son-in-law and grandchildren.
Sure.
So I'm not. But anyway, the next question I have, talk about education and getting people to do the trades. I got a son who has a electrical contracting business, and he had 60 employees before COVID hit, and he had to drop down to 30. Now he is trying to build back up because
Can't find it.
he hires 6 or 7 to get one. Our kids don't want to work.
Right.
And he is paying their education to get trained in electrical work and to get their apprentice license and everything else. So he probably spends $5,000 to $6,000 just to get one, because he's paying for 7, 8, 9 just to get that one.
Sure.
How do we fight that?
You know, I wish we could say that there are a couple of solutions, and I've actually thought about this a lot. We increase the amount of technical schools we have, and we put some of this stuff back into our high school education. The kids know these jobs actually exist, because right now they're being pushed into one thing, and that is send them to university and figure out what you want to do. Why not let them figure out what they want to try in high school? Why not give them that opportunity and that experience back in high school? Because they're learning a lot of things in high school that don't mean anything. Man, we're doing our children a disservice. They come out of school, they don't know how to balance a budget. They don't know what interest is. They don't know how to take out a loan. Again, they don't know how to change a tire in a car or check for what. I mean, these are things in everyday life that we used to learn in school, things that they used to teach you. That being said, again, government's not the solution. I don't believe in this one. We can incentivize it, and we can make sure that the infrastructure is there to get more of these. But it comes from the top down. When you see the federal government, these kids see it. When they see the federal government willing to forgive their student loans, what do they think? More government. I don't have to work. I can take all this out, and I don't have to do anything for it. The government is creating the culture of entitlement, and we can't be doing that in the state, saying we have to be fiscally responsible. We don't take out more than we have. We don't tax more than we should. And I believe that it trickles down. As we show that example from the top down, that comes back around, and I wish we could instill that work ethic in them, but that's just going to have to be something that comes from the home and something that trickles down. So go back there, and then we'll come up here.
There is a bill that just passed out, the Utah Fits All Scholarship, so it's up to $8,000 per kid from like kindergartner until 12. My question is that going to help the education in Utah first? And then second, what does a kindergartner or a first grader need with $8,000 scholarship?
No, that's a great point, and it did. And I believe that in education, the funding should follow students. And here's where I get burnt with what we do in education. So in the last 2 years, we've added $2.5 billion to our public education in 2 years. I believe that the teachers should be funded, and I believe absolutely they should get paid for the work they do. Last year, they gave teachers a $6,000 raise. That added up to $154 million. $6,000 raise. Great job for the teachers. It's a good thing. Should have been done. What happened to the other $2.35 billion? Where did that money go? Being eaten up in an administrative state. We are adding layer upon layer upon layer of administration to our school, and they are eating up that money. When we're talking about the Utah Fits All Scholarship, I believe that education is a good thing. I believe that the money should follow the children. You're paying your taxes. If you decide not to send your kid to school, the money should go somewhere else.
Or you send them to school and they don't learn,
Or
so then you have to pay still one
Right.
to teach them the things,
Sure.
$10,000 to still to teach them what the school should have.
And the reason why I like it, and the reason why I like the choice for the parents, is so that we can hold our schools accountable. So that we can say, you know what, if these school districts are not teaching the things that our children should be learning, then we pull our kids out. And we don't want to affect teachers. We don't want to take that away from them. So it's a fine balance to find. But I believe in backpack funding. The Utah Fits All Scholarship, it took a lot of things out that I would have left in. That being said, it started the conversation to be able to have and say, we might be failing our kids in education. The parents have the first right. If you look at the Utah Republican Party's constitution in the platform, it says we believe that the parents have the first right to educate their children and should decide how to do that. And so it gives them that ability. It's a step towards being able to hold the schools accountable. And if they're not doing what they're supposed to, the parents now have a tool to take advantage of.
I just have two questions.
Sure.
Number one is that on your flyer it said you're the only convention candidate.
Yep.
So after I ask my next question, if you could elaborate, that would be great.
Sure.
But you talk about taking money away, or not weaning ourselves away from the federal government and their handouts to us in Utah, which I respect. But what are we going to do to replace that money? It's kind of like taking drugs away from a drug addict.
Right.
And so what would you suggest that we do to fund that money that's going to be done?
Yeah. No, first and foremost, the federal government still takes our tax dollars. And should we fund infrastructure for interstates and interstate commerce? Yeah. I mean, that's kind of part of the deal. We all use it. When we talk about that when we send money to Washington, D.C., that money hits Washington, D.C. and turns around and comes back. But when it comes back, it's got a lot of strings attached to it. Why are we having to pay that money, send it to D.C., and they send it back and tell us how to use it? This is where we push back as a state and say, we decide how we're going to spend this money. That way, we can cut back on that spending. The other thing is our wasteful spending. We're wasting a lot of money in the state. When I talk about these billions of dollars, let's stop tax cuts for a minute. Yeah, they claim this tax cut over the last 4 years. They're saying it's $1.3 billion. And I'd like to see what they've done is cut state taxes and just fill it in with more of Joe Biden's funding money on the back end. $1 billion last year was added to our budget from Biden's American Rescue Plan. So we cut taxes $650 million on the state side, and then backfilled it $1 billion with money from the federal government, robbing Peter to pay Paul at this point. With that in mind, when we look at this and we take an objective step back and we talked about how we're spending, when you look at our budget and how it's doubled, how big could those tax cuts have been had we not doubled our spending? Where are we spending? If we start cutting back in areas, we can wean ourselves off of that money because the money that we're taking from them is going to fund projects we don't really need and things that we just want. And so that's how I propose it. This is kind of a two-tiered thing. As we push back from the federal government, we're able to expand our economy. You look at what Wyoming does and how they mine and how the way that they use their coal mines and their energy exploration to backfill into their tax and grow their economy and actually build their GDP. We could be doing that in the state and not relying on the federal government to continue to pay our bills. That answer your question?
Really quick, if you want to address firm the question on the convention only.
Oh yeah, convention only. So let's hit that part. That's good you reminded me. My wife will tell you, if you ask me two things to do at once, I always forget one of them. So, because she asked me the other day, she's like, did you do this? And I'm like, no, I did the thing you told. She said, I told you right after that. I said, well, that was your problem. So convention only. So in the governor's race, I'm the only candidate that's not gathering signatures. So all 4 other candidates in the race have filed to gather signatures. Some are actively gathering, some aren't. And so when I say I'm the only convention only, the rest of them will be at convention, but they've already had their opportunity to get to the ballot. They've made their intentions clear. Let's go over here.
Okay. Okay, so 3 things. First of all,
Ooh, you're asking 3. I told you I could get 2.
well, the first 2 are going to be easy. Okay. So when we get our driver's licenses, can we remove the thing that says that we can register to vote? It's not hard. You go to vote.utah.gov and you can register. So why is that on there?
That's a good question.
So that's number 1.
We could. I mean, that's just the legislature has to pass something in how to do it.
Okay, because that would alleviate a lot of what we're talking about in terms of information. Number 2, can we go back to just 1-day voting and paper ballots?
Okay.
That would be great. And number 3, when you're talking about like the federal lands and all of our resources and stuff, is it like 92% of Utah is?
So 67% of the state of Utah is owned by the federal government.
Yeah, so how do we reverse that and how do we start tapping into our resources?
You know, to John Curtis's credit, some people like him, some people don't, but to him, he has returned more of the federal lands to the state hands than any other congressman. So to him, kudos for that. And that's where it starts. It starts with our federal delegation and the state of Utah saying, hey, we need it for this and we're going to do this with it because you're keeping us from it. That's when the legislative process starts and that's when we get to start pushback. The other thing is we have to stop letting them take more. Because when we let them take things like barriers years and Grand Staircase as mine, they just make it whatever they want because they want it. They lock us off of production. They push grazing off of it. They stop mining. about the development of mining and extraction. I don't know if anybody's been out to the basin and seen what the oil rigs and things look like out there. Yeah, some people think they're an eyesore, but I think they're a lot better than 4,000 square acres of solar panels. I mean, but they would prioritize that. Right now, they're looking at putting 4,500 acres more of solar panels out west of Beaver. 4,500 acres is a lot of solar panels, and we're not there yet. So that's when I say prioritize our use of the land. That's where we can start taking little bits and pieces back. And every year, the legislature puts money into the defense fund. It's supposed to someday go to fighting the fight against getting our public lands back, because that's something we'd like to see hit the Supreme Court someday. I'd love to see it go to the Supreme Court and let them rule on the 10th Amendment. Is the federal government allowed to own more than 10 square miles? The 10th Amendment kind of lays it out. They should know more than 10 square miles in any one state. So should we let them continue? So that's a constitutional thing. What was your third question?
No, you go.
Okay, that was all of them?
I told you they were fast.
There we go.
I feel like I have a lot of questions too. But
Go for it. You might have to ask them one at a time.
so I guess the first one, we are the preferred host state for the 2034 Winter Olympics.
Sure.
With that, we're going to need infrastructure updates, especially in Salt Lake City, where we're already, and Utah County. So I guess, how do you feel about the 2034 Olympics coming back to Utah?
Yeah. No, I enjoy seeing the Olympics here. I like seeing the spotlight on Utah. That being said, it brought way more people to Utah. We were kind of a hidden gem at that point until they showed up, and now they just come in droves. But we don't mind that. That's a good question. I haven't thought a ton about it, but what I have thought about it is, where's the money going to come from? When you actually look at what saved, if we're going to be honest, and you look at what saved the 2022 or 2000, well, it's been a long time. The 2002 Olympics was actually 9/11, because Utah actually was never going to meet that budget. They were $650 million short. But once 9/11 happened, the security updates and the money that were brought in from those security updates were actually what finished paying those. And so Utah wasn't ready then. The way that we're spending fiscally right now, we're not ready now. And so I don't believe that we're ready now. But can we get our ducks in order by 2034? Maybe. But I think this should be up to the people, and there should be a lot more studies done about what people see and what people want before we make a giant decision going into it.
And then the second one, as someone that lives in Salt Lake City and visits downtown, there is a high transient homeless population, and it is spreading throughout Salt Lake City, especially at the track stations and rail stations. And as someone who has a family member in law enforcement with the county sheriffs, they see a lot of transient people come in and out of the jails. So how do you plan on tackling maybe potentially that issue?
This one may be something that loses me a lot of votes at some point, but I've always told everybody I'm going to shoot straight with you, so I'll continue to do that. People say that the homeless problem is shortage of housing, and it's absolutely not. If you look at any studies, it shows it has nothing to do with affordability or the housing situation. But they want to make it about that because it's easier to spend money on it. This year, the legislature put forward $165 million, I believe, to tackle the homeless crisis. Where's that money going? What are we doing with it? How's it being spent?
Give $1 million to 160.
Right. So
but they don't do that.
No, and the biggest problem, and you've seen it, the biggest problem came when we closed the state mental institutions. When we started shutting those down and stepping back from helping people with their mental health issues, that's where all the problems began. This is a mental health crisis and people out on the street. And a lot of them, it's kind of their choice. Between mental health and drugs, that is 98% of why people are homeless. You have to make it harder for them to do what they're doing. When you make it a hospitable environment for them to squat on the streets, they're going to do it. But if you make it tough for them, they're going to find a different way. They're going to, unfortunately, go somewhere else or do something different. And those are the choices we have to start presenting because, again, it's not government's job to continue to take and play babysitter and do those types of things. We can help these people, but it's not by giving them money. They don't want, the studies have shown they don't want to live in homes. They choose this life. And so we have to make it harder for them to squat and be a problem. We have to enforce the laws that are on the books and allow law enforcement to enforce those because as of right now, we've kind of tied their hands in a lot of it. Go ahead. Do you have any more first?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of stories going on with the squatters laws. What's Utah's squatters laws?
That's a good point. I haven't actually looked into that, but I have heard in the past that if you live in an area for 2 years, you have the right to continue to live there, but I wish I knew more about that one.
We better double check our laws here.
Right. All right, anybody else? Let's go back there and we'll come over here.
Hi, I'm Debbie Ann. I'm a new state and county delegate.
Thank you. It's a terrible job, but somebody has to do that.
It's tired of just sitting and not watching, and I wanted to get into the game. My question is, like, when last election for governor, I voted for Hughes, and my problem with that was that he didn't seem to give a whole lot of press and a whole lot of, like, word out there. And I thought more people would have voted for him if we got more out there. How are we going to get your name out there more so people are actually aware of you? And I don't believe that people are really on Cox's side.
Yeah.
He, like I said, like you said, he suddenly became conservative, and so that is one of my main concerns. I'm concerned about the squatters' rights also. That's hitting the internet virally.
Sure.
Recently, and where people are I heard 88,000 illegal immigrants.
7 years. 7 years on squatters. There you go.
Is that Utah?
They have to pay.
Yes.
They have
But
to pay property taxes.
Okay. 7 years on property taxes, when there's 7 years. There we go. We have to get.
the problem is that some states, I don't know what Utah's doing, but some states, the police show up and say, this is a civil matter, you have to take and get these people evicted, and it takes 2 years to get them out of your house. That's what some states are doing. Anyway, but my question mainly is, like, how do we get advertisement more out there? Like John Curtis, he's got an advertisement going every 5 minutes, it seems like, it's so like, I'm like, oh, we don't have like a whole lot
Owns
of
the media station?
Sure.
Can I jump in on this one?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and get it, and then I have some thoughts.
I want to hear his thoughts, but what I want to say is hosting events like this, getting Carson to these events. I put this out on Tuesday or Wednesday. Look how many people are here. This is actually being recorded. Thank you, Max Sims. He's here. He's recording it. This is going to go up online so that people can see what Carson has to say tonight. Because there's a lot of events going on. A lot of them have multiple candidates. I really am glad that we're able to have a frank conversation with him tonight so that the spotlight is on Carson, right? So talk to other delegates. Talk to the people who you know who are involved in the party. Get them out to these events because as delegates, it's our responsibility to vet these candidates and choose the people who we feel are going to best represent us when we go to election time. So that's why it's important we do these events and we have a short window to be able to vet these candidates. So that's my thought on the best way to get the word out.
No, that's great.
Conference was so, the conference that we just had, it was really kind of a disorienting disaster.
That one was hard. We weren't quite ready.
Talk about discrimination for voting.
We weren't quite ready. They weren't quite ready for that caucus. They expanded it a little faster than we were quite ready for it. We had some unforeseen errors that came down, but to that credit, the caucus convention system, in my opinion, is still the best way to do this because, and I showed you that I believe in all these because we're having these conversations tonight. I hope you see who I really am. I hope you're able to look me in the eye and have this conversation and know that I might tell you something you don't like or you don't agree with. But yet I'm still willing to tell it to you because in these discussions and in these situations, we can have those conversations and you don't come back later and say, hey, you said you believed in this, but you really didn't. And you can look me in the eye. So with that, again, we have 60 people here tonight about it. Go tell 10 people a piece and have them tell 10 more people. That's how this word spreads. In elections, word of mouth drives everything. Also, convention matters. Your vote at convention matters. And when we talk about, you wanted to talk about approval ratings and things. So Deseret News released a poll about a month ago. It had the governor at 50% amongst Republicans. And Deseret News is very friendly with him. If they could have put him at 55%, they would have. It was plus or minus 5%. Every poll we've seen has the governor with Republicans registered to vote between 42 and 47%. That's unprecedented for a Republican governor in the state. But this is what I come back to. When you try to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody. Instead of doing what's right, shooting straight, and always saying what you believe, and you change for which crowd you get into, you're going to make everybody mad. And that's what happens. And so I believe that plays into it. But when we go to convention, again, I put my money where my mouth was. I believe in you. I believe your ability to have a keen look into who these candidates are. And if I can't win a convention, I don't deserve to be on the primary ballot. But after convention, the Utah Republican Party is 950 some odd thousand members. There are that many registered Republicans in the state. There will be 4,000 delegates at the state convention. The Utah Republican Party has an email list that has 100 and some thousand Republicans on it. If you win a convention with 60%, you become a nominee for the party in the coming election. You then have the entire party apparatus behind you. And this is why it's so important that we put one candidate over the top in this race of 60%. And that's something I want you to go talk to all your other fellow delegates and all your other county or your state delegates about. Is that whomever we put forward has to be able to perform in the primary. Guys, far too many times we put candidates out of convention that can't quite get it done in the primary. They may say all the right things. They may tell you all the right things. But there's a lot of things you have to look into, like a better electability. Things that can be used against them in the upcoming races. Those are the kind of things that you also have to be looking into. Is the candidate that we're going to put out, do they have the charisma? Do they have the opportunity? Can they perform in a primary? What negatives are going to be used against them in that primary race? That's where you have the choice. And when we put somebody out with 60% of convention, the party has more money this year than they've had in 50 years, 60 years. And when you get 60% of convention, the apparatus of the party is yours. And as chairman of the party, I know everybody. I know all the counties. I've worked with them at a daily basis. I know how to leverage the party and the apparatus of the Republican Party to get that name out and spread the word. And so that's why we're going to try and win 60% of convention, and that's how we get out of it. That. All right, let's go here. No, let's go there and then there.
Answer my question.
Okay, perfect.
I've appreciated that tonight you said several times that you have ideas, and you might say them and we might not agree with them. And that there may be a variety of ideas and a variety of needs in this party. And I feel like we are stronger in the Republican Party, broader base of like-minded people we can find. These are like-minded doesn't mean we all believe the same thing. There are rural needs, there are urban needs, there are a variety of people. There's blue collar, there's white collar, there's all kinds of needs here in the party. That tells me that we need a way to have these ideas discussed, developed, vetted, revised, and captured some way that attracts this bigger group of people. When I was looking at the state party platform, I found that it has not been updated since 2009. A lot of things have happened in 15 years. One, why do you think that the platform has not been updated? And number two, is that really the right place to capture the ideas that define the Republican Party in Utah?
No, that's absolutely an excellent question. So I look at the platform as kind of a basis, and I said this on Tucker Carlson when I disagreed with the governor a couple of years ago. I went on Tucker Carlson and said I disagreed. And I said the reason being, and Tucker came back. It was a tough interview. He was wanting blood, and I was like, no. Here's the thing: the Republican Party should be an open door. Everybody's welcome. But I always hated them calling it the Big Tent because a tent insinuates that it moves. And I always said the party can't move. The party has to be based on a core set of principles. Everyone's welcome. But those overarching principles that make us Republicans shouldn't be able to move. And I believe that's what the platform should be. It should be an overarching idea that doesn't need to be updated. But when you talk about updating it, ACT knows how hard it is to update it, and the State Central Committee is kind of a fickle group to deal with.
Isn't just our voting?
I have great hair because of the State Central Committee, but that's how the platform gets changed. And so I believe when we get very specialized with a platform, we tend to pigeonhole ourselves, and I believe it should be a more broad and encompassing thing, where we can say everybody is welcome, but we're not going to move the party to fit one side or another, because it comes back. If you're wandering down the road trying to chase what's popular, you're going to end up driving everybody away, and nobody knows what to expect.
Let me just quickly address real quick. When it comes to the platform of the party, it can change. It is actually difficult to change. It's by design. Like Carson said, we don't want us blowing in the wind. But it's actually state delegates that have the opportunity to do that. It's at state conventions that you're able to actually make amendments to the platform. I believe there's actually some proposals that will come up at state convention that I've heard about on the platform. One that someone actually talked to me about around privacy and having the party have a statement around privacy. So look for that. But one of the problems we have at state convention is it's a very long meeting. Very long meeting. Plan on that. Please plan on a very long day. These types of platform meetings are usually at the end of the meeting. And if too many people leave and don't have a quorum left of delegates, we can't address it. So it has been proposed before. Most of the time, we just don't get to it. We just don't get to it. And so we have to change it because typically the meeting gets ended before we actually get to those important things. And they're important things and part of your responsibility as a state delegate as well as voting for people. So
yeah, because after people vote, they usually leave. So I would suggest stick around.
Why don't they switch the thing, do the platform first?
That's up for people that's been highly discussed, and that's up for you guys to decide. It will surely come up, I can promise you. It will surely come up. You'll see Rob Axon start to sweat about 8 minutes into this convention because they'll come up and they'll want paper ballots and they'll want to change the order of the agenda. And it's that way for a reason. And so, but you'll have the opportunity to do it. So don't leave. Don't do. Oh, I did not answer. Okay, so you talked about, I remember where I was going 10 minutes late. You talked about paper ballots and same-day balloting. We did talk about that. Whether we like it or not, I'm a same-day voting guy. Let's have same-day voting. But the people in Utah kind of like mail-in voting. And those who are not committed to it as much as others, they don't mind it because they don't have to go out. They don't have to stand in line. They can find it. So there is a compromise bill that I believe is a good solution, and many have talked about it. So Kara Berthland proposed the bill, and I pray they don't gut it. When I'm governor, we're going to make it at the top of the pile because I believe it's that important. What it does is at the beginning of any election cycle, it makes it so if you want a mail-in ballot, you go online or in person and you register to get a mail-in ballot. It is an opt-in format. If you are acute enough and want to vote badly enough, it will send you a ballot, but you have to go in and register for that ballot every 2 years. So every cycle you have to start and you have to register for that ballot, which is good for a couple of reasons. One, you're not sending out ballots. My grandpa hadn't moved in 60 years. He got 3 ballots last election. 3 ballots. If he wasn't an honest guy, what does he do? Takes all 3 of them and turns them in. So that being said, Kara's bill is great. I believe that it's the right step because it kind of gives the best of both worlds. Those who don't want to go out, and they can still opt in for that ballot. But it also scrubs the voter rolls of those every couple of years. So you're not sending multiple ballots to the same addresses if you move, if you change. You don't have to go in and do it unless you're registering again. If you don't do that, it becomes same-day balloting. If you don't opt in for a mail-in ballot, you show up the same day and you vote in person. So that, am I quoting that right now? Because that's pretty close. Yep. Yeah.
Was that up in this last legislature?
Did they propose it? Yeah. It never made it.
It
didn't make it through.
Didn't make it through. So that's something I'll put a big priority in because I think our elections, if the people like them, great. You can opt in for them. But I think this is a good compromise. you get the election integrity that we want, and we're able to still have something that people like, let's go here and then over there.
That would be a good compromise, because my friend's dad died, he got ballots twice after 2 different elections, one time after they told the county he was dead.
Yeah.
He still got a ballot.
And the other part about what we're doing is the ERIC system. I don't like that we're having a third party manage our data for the state. I believe that we should come up with something in-house. Matt may disagree with me on this, but I believe we can talk. Right. I believe that we should come up with something in-house to be able to house our own data. And it may be more expensive, but again, there are a few things that were actually the government's job to do, and one of those was elections. The other thing is pluralities in elections. We've, for years, tried to fix it. In this last election, you had a governor elected with 35%, 36% of the Republican vote, so that equated to about 15% of the general population vote, and that's how they were elected. But we've pushed for runoffs, we've pushed for preferential balloting, we push for all kinds of things to eliminate so that you have a majority to elect a Republican and a governor in this race. So you have a majority of Republicans that actually want it. I believe that the runoff is the best thing, but again, the state's come and said, hey, we can't do a runoff, that's too expensive. Again, it's $1 million. You're gonna go spend, we could fund the runoff election for 1,000 years for what you just spent on a baseball stadium, so don't tell me we don't have the money for it. All right, we're there.
I can talk about it. Not just come over. My name's Garrett. I'm running for state senate, not a delegate, so I can't vote on you until June.
That's okay.
My confidence will be there. I've got one question, but it has 2 parts.
Okay. Hopefully I don't forget the second one.
So my question deals with deregulation.
Yeah.
So the first part is, you mentioned small businesses. What would you plan to do to help deregulate some of the paperwork and some of the burden that's on small businesses to promote the growth of Utah home businesses versus the big corporations? The second part is that we see a lot of cities now that are being constrained more and more by the state government in terms of what they can and can't do with their land as well. So they don't want high density housing. The state says they have to have high density housing. They want 22 feet garages. The state says they have to have 20-foot garages. So what do you want to do, or what can you do to deregulate for the state?
So let's talk deregulation first, so I don't forget the second part. So deregulation, I was talking to somebody who's a contractor the other day. He says, I'm an electrical contractor. Every year I have to go back to the state and renew my license. He said, I didn't used to have to do that. The way that we're making them, I'm telling you, electricians that learned how to be an electrician in the 80s are still meeting the requirements today. So why are we sending them back for continuing education every year? It costs them days off of work and time out of their day and $500 a year to continue to push regulations.
And somebody else can be taking the test. I'm always doing it for my husband's business.
Sure, that's just it.
The secretary could do it.
Exactly. And it's just become, we're putting a burden on people like that. So I think that's one place where deregulation can actually help with the problem. Your second facet, there is again, we saw the push to appoint the Attorney General and have control from the top. I believe that the local government is the best way for people to do things. I believe that the cities and the counties should have first say in their zoning laws. They do. But the government, in the state government, the governor's office is making a big push to force counties and cities to zone in the way that the state wants them to, because they believe that's how it should be. Again, I don't believe in that, because if your city or your town is doing something that you don't like, you have the ability to either change it at your local government or leave. Those are the kind of the options you have. But if the state's forcing your town and the town next to you and the town next to them to do the same thing, you can't get away from it. And that's why I believe that local government always has the answers. The state should never infringe on the county or the city's ability to zone and to grow in the way that they see fit, because, as Reagan said, the government closest to the people is the one that's going to make the best decisions for them. You don't need a government 3,000 miles away telling you what to do in your backyard.
So you hit a point where you made me think of something, and it sounds like, I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like you guys might be on the same page as me. With the state telling the towns what they should do. I think the state's telling the towns what they should do, yet at the same time telling the government to get out of the state, is beyond hypocritical.
Sure.
The state in Salt Lake should practice with the towns what they want Washington, D.C. to do with them.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. All right, we have one over there in the back, and we'll come back up here.
I was just thinking about elections. My husband and I were talking about, cutting costs integrity,
Sure.
having integrity. And we thought about, the ballot option, this is great, but what about for those of us who like paper ballots and want those to be, counted properly, having them mailed out to us. My son got several ballots, and people get several ballots.
Sure.
Let's just, maybe they're sitting at Macy's on a counter. We get our ballots anywhere. But we fill them out and then we bring them in and we have to turn them in and sign with your ID, and you turn them in, you put them in the box. That way, if somebody else finds another ballot somewhere, tries to change and sign my name, they'll know it's already been turned in.
Yep. No,
ballot.
Ballot harvesting has become kind of a problem. You have a lot of people turning in ballots for others, and they'll say, if it's legal, we're going to do it. And that has become a big problem. But again, in the state, you're seeing a lot of people get 3, 4, 5 different ballots.
But this way, if they're turning them into my precinct, I know who they are.
Sure. And that's the way.
It's staffed at 24 hours. We get volunteers. People will come do that.
Sure.
Just sign your name and put it in.
Sign your name. And there's been a big conversation about that. It is, sending out mail ballots, letting people come home and then deliver them to somewhere. But then again, some people don't like the drop boxes. And so, again, I think that this deal that Kara Bergman had is a really good option because you're still having to show your ID. You're only going to get one ballot. That way, they know you're not getting 2 or 3 or 4. You're not turning in multiples. It makes it a lot harder for ballot harvesting. And then if you don't have the wherewithal or the care to register to get your mail-in ballot, you show up and vote in person the same day. And I think it has legs. And as we've seen in the session, they had a hard time even making that go forward. So incremental wins, and that's somewhere where I think as Republicans we miss the vote sometimes. We want the whole hog and we want it right now, where the Democrats have been playing chip away for 25 years, 30 years, 50 years now. And they take a little win at a time. They take a little bit at a time, and over time they eat an elephant one bite at a time. No pun intended. We have to be okay with incremental wins and start somewhere and make small changes, which eventually will effectuate big change.
I just want to build on something that you said earlier and that we could use as we talk to others. Because in our precinct, in our caucus, we had too many that said they were cost.
Sure.
And I don't know how many old folks from Salt Lake County are here, but I'm old enough to have dealt. I keep making myself look bad, but I'm old enough to have dealt a few times with the Salt Lake County Sheriff, which no longer exists because we gave away the only law enforcement agency that we had any control over.
Sure.
And it's not good. And as we talk to people, we should let them know that Cox, they want to consolidate that power, wants to take away from us any control that we have over people, and that is a big deal.
Sure.
That we should make sure that people understand.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's 3 things you can look at, and I'm not making this up, man. I'm just relaying information. HB 545, which is an open exploration of making those committees appointed, is run by Brady Graham. That's one to look into. Go read it for yourself. See what it actually entails. Go look at Mike McKell's article from last October, I believe it was, in the Deseret News, where they talked about making it the appointed officer. Everybody who knows that's the governor's brother. They wanted to appoint the attorney general. The last one is go look at the press conference from, it's probably 3 weeks ago, and it's one of the governor's monthly addresses. He said it himself out of his own mouth. I should be the one to appoint your state school board members. Let me tell you something. The governor appoints the board of higher education. Look at our university. Is that what you want for your public schools?
How many states besides us do not vote for lieutenant governor?
I'd have to go look at that. I don't know for sure, but that's been a hot topic lately, and that's somewhere where I feel we should make a change. And some disagree with me on this, and that's okay. But that's where I feel we should actually have an elected Secretary of State too. And the reason we went away from an elected secretary, the separately elected Secretary of the State, is some felt that at some point a Democrat Secretary of State could be elected. The governor was a Republican. At that point, the Secretary of State then became the governor. Something happened to the governor. Then said governor was now a Democrat, not a Republican. Matt, did you have a comment?
No, just the next question.
Okay, yeah, no. So I'll finish up with this one. So with that being said, I don't think that the lieutenant governor should be running her own election. I don't think she should be helping raise money for candidates. She shouldn't be sitting on financial reports for other candidates. She shouldn't be helping them raise money nor weighing in on elections when she herself should be overseeing elections. Whether she does anything or not, that's up to her. But I've always been one, let's avoid the very perception of impropriety. Because then if there is questions, we know that we have an honest judge when it comes down to making these decisions. Because we've seen some in the last couple of weeks that we're like, if we weren't in that position, would you be making that decision? So that's why I do like an elected Secretary of State, but I think we still should have a lieutenant governor with the governor, so therefore if something happens to the governor, they step into the position, and they still are very similar, very akin when it comes to policy, and they could then represent the same way the governor did. All right, Matt.
So we've talked a bit about elections. This last session, I don't know if you were aware, there was one of our legislators that proposed a bill that would set up a multi-party primary, also known as a jungle primary. So I would like your opinion on that setup in our elections. What do you think of it?
Yeah, you want to know the second quickest way besides appointing everybody by the governor to ruin the state is have a jungle primary where everybody and anybody jumps into the primary and it becomes a spend fest. You look at any state that has done that, it has become a war of money. In Utah, you'll see the governor's race between all the candidates. You might see 10 to 15 million spent this year, if we're lucky, if we get that high. In Illinois last year, one candidate spent $500 million in the primary and didn't win. One candidate, $500 million. But that's what happens with Joan. You open that up and you open up a can of worms. And so that's another thing I suggest everybody watch for, because we as a Republican Party, we only want Republicans voting in our. That is why we have a closed primary. That's why we only allow for Republicans, because we don't need Democrats coming in. When I was chairman, Mac and I and another one of our county chairs, we went to the state and we said we have far too many Democrats switching over to vote in our primaries. We have way too many party switchers. So what did we do? We moved the filing deadline. And if you were not registered as a Republican by January the 8th, you can no longer change in this election cycle. And we did that for a specific reason. It's not because we disenfranchise anybody. It's because in 2020, we had 53,000 Democrats leave the Democratic Party to vote in the Republican primary. We didn't want that happening again, and this year it won't. Let's go back there.
I have two questions, but I can't remember two of them, so I had to write them down.
Perfect. Maybe I should do that.
So my first question is, the state government is talking about forcing all the counties to pay for homeless shelters if they don't have a homeless shelter in their county. That's a problem for me because we talk about homeless population choosing, and it's not a housing problem. So that to me would be a taxing problem because I pay state taxes.
Sure.
And the state taxes should be helping fund the homeless shelters.
Right.
And helping the people who need the help. And so I don't know how that taxing me on the county level, because I don't have a homeless shelter here, is going to help anybody.
Yeah. Now, again, that's where the state needs to get together with the counties. This is not something you force down on them. This is not something that is a top-down mandate. This is everybody working together and seeing what the individual needs of the counties. How can the state help? What can we do? And again, it shouldn't be solely shoved on the back of the counties because you're right, you're already paying state taxes. What is the state spending your money on? It's something we evaluate. What are we missing? What do we need?
Okay, my second question is Convention of States.
Yeah.
Could you speak to that?
Sure.
I need to be more educated. Who's got that crazy idea that we would open the Constitution and play with it and then let all those blue states make any kind of decision of any kind?
Sure.
They're just...
You know, some Republicans and conservatives, libertarians think it's a great idea for a convention of states. You know, on the outside it sounds really great because you say, you know what, we're going to force Congress, we're going to put term limits in. The second you open the Constitution up, like you said, you make for a problem because, as we've seen, the Democrats in Congress and the Senate, they have a way of getting whatever they want, whenever they want. How do we feel that would be any different when we open the Constitution up to interpretation? With that, I go back to what I was talking about earlier about the governors banding together. I believe that is the way forward. I have all lost faith in the federal government. It is too big, it is too clumsy, and it has shown time and time again, no matter how much we talk about it, they won't cut their fiscal spending. They won't do what the people want. They just continue to do what they want. The governors are going to have to band together and tell the federal government, no, we signed on to this, but we're not living by you're not living by the Constitution and the things that we set up and agreed to when we became states. And so that's where the state government and the governors have an absolute chance to make it, but I don't know if the convention of the states is the right answer. Let's go there. Oh, actually here and then there. He asked hard questions. I don't know the answer to back there.
see what I did, John Curtis. But no, on election integrity. So I am highly suspect of the machines that we have here in Utah. The Arizona case is revealing a lot more than a lot of people would like to admit. Now, as governor, would you look at the machines closely and petition the legislature to make some dramatic changes?
So yeah, no, there's one county that we really have problems with, and that's Salt Lake County. I mean, Mac knows this firsthand. During the 2022 midterms, during the Mike Lee race, they started releasing numbers from every other county, but we didn't have anything from Salt Lake. We got 50% from other counties, and we still didn't have anything from Salt Lake. At that point, I called the county clerks in both Washington and Utah County. I was like, guys, just stop turning them in for a minute because this looks highly suspect. 2 days later, we still don't have results. We have some, but nothing. And it continued to trickle on. So we sent the auditors from the state down there, and we're like, what is going on? I called Mike Schultz. I said, Mike, send him down. To this day, we still don't know what was going on. But there are a few things. I'm not a huge fan of internet connectivity. I mean, that seems to be a big problem. When they say, oh, well, they're not connected to the internet, you show up and they are. And we went with their test ballots. And we have to continue to send poll watchers. I mean, us as Republicans, we have to take a keen interest in what it is and watch for yourself and go see it and ask questions because they opened it up before the county parties are allowed to send people in and look at them and see the machines and be able to do it. We sent in our county chair from Utah County last election, and they were able to put a thumb drive in there, and they're like, well, this is a master reset thing. I'm like, how do we know you're not going to? Well, you have to have the password. And we're like, okay, well, who has the password? We don't know. Like, you're trying to instill confidence in me, and it's not working. So, that being said, Salt Lake County still runs the Dominion machines. Amelia got rid of them here in Utah County, I believe. I think it's time to get rid of them. Like, everybody's suspect about them. There's been a lot of problems. Why open this up for that anymore? Again, government's one job is to hold elections, and we're not even doing that very well.
Carson, really quick.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we have time for probably 2 more questions.
I was gonna say.
Because I appreciate everybody for coming.
No, for sure.
But, yeah, 2 more questions, and then, because we've got to get out of here at 9 o'clock, okay?
I think we were there and then over there. So let's go there and then to you.
All right, so you talked about kind of like the administration upon administration. So, well, I'm a state delegate, my sister's a county delegate for Salt Lake, and as she's been attending the mayoral races, they said that there's a lot of like ghost positions or open positions within like the county level that have been open for like 15 plus years.
Right.
So, if you are to be elected as governor and you want to get rid of waste, like, would you look at positions that have been open for a certain amount of time, or would you eliminate positions to potentially save and get rid of the bureaucratic red tape?
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent question. I think we can. Again, this is where we have to be careful. I always tell everybody, the sword you wield today is the one they'll kill you with tomorrow. So we have to be careful what we implement, because we don't want to implement something heavy-handed that's not going to be fair if we were to use it against our own side. That's the only way everybody knows I like to say what I think and do what I need to. That being said, I always live by the rules because you have to shoot straight and you can't lean one way or the other. So getting the state government involved in county government is tough. But that's when the governor can step in and go to the citizens of the county and say, hey, this is what you wonder why you're being taxed so much. Look how many administrators Jenny Wilson has. You've added, like, I think she has a mayor. She's the mayor. Then she has 6 deputy mayors now. I mean, the county budget's like $1.6 billion county budget. I mean, you want to talk about waste, and that's it. But you look at the schools as well. You have superintendents making $400,000 a year, but they have an assistant that makes $250,000, and they have an assistant, and they have an assistant. So this is where your money's going to. But look no further than administration. We have to stop the money from stopping in the executive suite. When it comes to that, it needs to trickle down. It needs to go to places it belongs, especially when it comes to our schools. But in that situation, what I'm getting at is information is always your best bet. Sometimes where government, state government shouldn't be getting involved, they should let the public know what's happening and use that pulpit that you have to be able to say, you want to know why your taxes are so high? Here's an open book. The auditors will show you because it is an open process. You just have to pay attention long enough to see what's happening.
Yes, could you please speak on ESG?
Oh, yes. This is one of my favorite things. So, my very first, this could take longer than 20 minutes. This was a bad question to ask last. So, my very first meeting, and I like to tell this, my very first meeting as chairman, it was the special election for the treasurer's office. And that was when we elected Marlo Oaks to fill that vacancy. It's been one of the best things the state's ever had. I don't know if any of you know Marlo or have heard him, but man, what a blessing, what a blessing. He has done more than probably anyone in this country to fight ESG and natural asset companies. So ESG, environmental social governance, for those of you who don't know what it is, it basically gives all these big companies the ability to do whatever they want to you and use your money any way they want in the name of saving the environment. And I mean basically carte blanche for whatever they want to do. Natural asset corporations are the same thing. These things are absolute poison and they need to be shut down at all costs. And when Marlo blows the whistle on something like this, you need to pay attention because he doesn't do it for any reason other than it's going to hurt everybody. And when government and when these big corporations, they can't force them, when the government can't force it down your throat, what are they going to do? They're going to go and make sure you live. I always say in the agricultural sector, you're going to eat bugs and you're going to like it. And that is when they'll stop, is when they tell you what to do and how to do it, because they will make it so you can't eat beef anymore. Just this last session, see, now I'm going way down the rabbit hole. Just this last omnibus they passed last weekend. Did you know in that omnibus spending bill there were $15 million allotted specifically to electronic ear tags for cattle in the United States? They are going to make it mandatory for ranchers and farmers to tag their cattle with an electronic ID tag at birth. Do you know why they do this? Go ask the Europeans. You want to know why the European farmers are tearing their country apart? Because they can't live anymore. Because they can no longer make their livelihood from farming. The government has cut their throats. And they started with electronic ear tags. Because if you do not meet their nitrogen goals, if you don't meet their BS carbon goals, and all of the things they are ramming down your throat, you know what they do? They stop you from being able to sell your cattle at market. They stop them from crossing state lines. They tag them so that you will go out of business because you didn't do what they said. ESG is the same thing. They will do it. You buy too many guns on your credit card, but we're going to stop you from doing that. You drove too many miles this month. We're going to stop you from doing that. You go to apply for a loan. Well, you drove too many miles last month, so you can no longer buy a loan. That is what ESG is. That's what natural asset. Does anybody here know what a natural asset corporation is? So this was the latest one that Marlo blew the whistle on. What this does is it gives, they were trying to put this on the stock exchange. It was trying to go on the New York Stock Exchange. That foreign countries, big businesses and entities, could buy up the ability to regulate natural assets. We're talking water, we're talking air quality, we're talking all of these things. So some corporation, just to give you an example, some corporation or country, could be China, could be Africa, could be anywhere in the globe, could buy the regulation to regulate the clean air where you live. And if you made the air too dirty, they can crack down on you. If you violate what they say you should or shouldn't be doing with the water, they can take your property from you. These things are happening. Here in this state, we have things called conservation easements. Does anybody know what a conservation easement is? Conservation easements are in the same class as all these things. And anytime the federal government, or government in particular, touches a conservation easement, they go to these farmers or ranchers, and people who own big swaths of property, and they say, if you'll put your land into this conservation easement, and we'll turn it back to its natural thing, and you can still farm it, and you can still graze it, but you just have to live by these stringent standards. Well, when you don't read the fine print, it says they can change those at any time. These things are poison. Go ask the farmers in the Midwest that signed on to these 15, 20 years ago. Farmers are getting squeezed. The average farm debt in the United States is the last agricultural census. Average farmers in debt $1.7 million. It's a terrible thing. And
that's incorrect, because the average farmer is a Chinese company. And
Look,
right.
that's a good point. The Chinese buy everything. The average independent farmer and rancher in the United States is $1.7 million in the hole. So these companies come to them and say, hey, if you put it in this conservation easement, we'll pay you every year to not do this. When you do that, what you don't realize is in the fine print, at any time, if you don't live up to the agreement that you make, they come and take your private property. And every year they can turn those up to make it harder and harder and harder for you. Our state government has been involved in these. They've happened. These are things we have to watch and that they know about that's happening. We have to be vigilant when it comes to ESG, natural asset corporations, and things like conservation easements. And they are happening in the state, and they are very dangerous because private property is a founding principle of this country. Owning your home, owning your property. Us as ranchers, it's our livelihood. And it's been in my family for almost 200 years now. And we want it to stay there. But as it becomes harder to do it, the government comes in with these handouts, and they're looking for any way they can. It comes down to control, guys. It just does. When they can't control you, they don't get what they want out of the deal. And so they want to have control in every facet. They want to control your children in schools, which comes back to the federal funding. They want to control what you eat, where you drive, how you drive, how often you drive. They want to control now what you eat because cows are ruining the environments, and cricket protein is the best thing since sliced bread. I don't know about you, but it'll be a cold day in hell before I eat cricket. In a roundabout way, I hope that answers your question. And all the other, thank you all for coming out. I appreciate it. Man, just give Josh. And thank you all for showing up as state delegates. I mean, it's a heavy deal. You get a lot of phone calls and text messages and stuff, but go tell your friends. We're going to do another one of these at some point, and hopefully those who aren't here tonight, they can show up again. And so, again, the plea that I would put out is let's see who can win in the primary. Evaluate which of these candidates you think has the best opportunity and is articulate enough and charismatic enough to go into that primary and actually do what it takes to win. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you all very much.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much again for being here. I know it was last minute. I appreciate you taking your time out. I watched Carson when he was elected as the state party chair. And I was sitting there with a couple of state representatives, and the odds were stacked against him. At best, they were stacked against him. All the money was going into his opponents. Then Carson got up there, spoke the truth, and as I was sitting there, one of the representatives turned to me and said, there's our next party chair. Because he got up there, he was real, he was a straight shooter, and he spoke the truth. And I think that's something that we can see again, even though Cox has a machine that's working for him. But when we have somebody that's willing to get up there and speak the truth, people will see that. So thank you again. Get the word out. I will endorse Carson Jorgensen for your next governor here in the state of Utah.